8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Right Fit Podcast. I'm your host, Daryl Jacobs. Join me every Friday noon Eastern Time with guests who are decision makers in both collegiate athletics and professional sports. But joining me today is a special guest, the commissioner of the Skyline Conference, Miss Linda Bruno. Linda, welcome to the Right Fit.
Thank you. Well, thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Thank you for taking the time. I know you're very, very busy. And like most of us, you're enjoying this fantastic NCAA March Madness, both on the men and women's side. So let's see what happens the rest of the way. But thank you for taking the time again. But before we get to the Q&A, go ahead, Linda.
I just said you're welcome.
But before we get to the Q&A, briefly discuss your journey into collegiate athletics and why.
Well, I have a very odd background, actually, for the way to work you into athletics. I'm an Iona College graduate. And yes, Shaheen Holloway did work at Iona, so we're claiming him during this March Madness journey. But I graduated from Iona and taught English in the Bronx for a year and figured out very quickly I was not a good teacher. And I decided to go back for my master's degree at Iona and was with some of my classmates one night after class out having a drink, and someone came over and told me, you know, the new, the basketball coach who had been there a year was just named the AD, and they combined the job, and he's looking for people in the department. And the deal was you were able to go to school for free if you worked at as is the case at a lot of colleges. And the gentleman's name was Jim Valvano. So I sent my resume in, and he called me and said, you know, the only job I have is the athletic department secretary. And I said, well, I was an English major. I can type fairly well. So he said, yeah. I said, I'll probably just stay a couple of years and move on from there. So I went and I was the athletic department secretary, and quickly found out that in addition to not being able to teach, I also couldn't type or do any of the regular office things that you needed done. But Jim had a lot of patience with me. And as a result, he said, look, I have to promote you because I need a real secretary in here. So I went from there to doing academic advisement at Iona and stayed for 5 years, and, you know, was there when we beat Louisville and all those great things that happened, and moved on then to associate AD at Yale briefly. And then, and that was even odd because the assistant that I hired, he was a young, right out of college, was a Boston College grad. And he saw in then the NCAA News, you might be too young to remember that, but the NCAA News used to be the Bible of where you went and you looked for jobs. It wasn't any of the online stuff or anything. He found a listing for, the Big East just formed and they're looking for a director of championships. You need to apply for this job so you can get me tickets. So I listened to him. And I did, and I was hired and got to be part of that whole rise of the Big East at the time, Dave Gavitt, and loved every minute of it. And then after I was there for 14 years, and was able to get the Atlantic10 commissioner's job. So that another job that I absolutely loved. And from there, I decided to go into my own business. So I run a Bruno Sports Enterprise, and I do that through Aclaro Sports and through Fastlane, and have been able to do some searches for coaches. And I've done a lot of one of the things that I really pride myself on is, I still have coaches call me and ask me, what do you think of this job? What do you think of that? And I have ADs call me. So whether or not I get the search, I give the advice, which is probably why that piece will never be completely successful for me financially, because I just love to be able to help people. And here's where I am. And again, I just got into the business in a very, very odd way. This is not my path that I thought I was going to take.
Well, most people may not know the Skyline conference is a Division III conference. But you had a lot of commission expense, as I said, commissionership experience. As you mentioned, the Big East, where you served as associate commissioner, and you mentioned the Atlantic 10, serving commissioner there for 14 years. Talk about your career path into the commissionership more in detail.
Yeah, I think, it's funny because when I started at the Big East, I mean, now it seems second nature to us, but conference work it was out there, but it wasn't something everybody thought about. So I went from being on a campus, I was on a campus at Yale, to then, transitioning into being in a conference office. And conference office work is very different than being on a campus. One of the things you have to continually, and I even have to do it now, remind yourself of what it's like to try and do these things on a campus. I mean, I could tell everyone, okay, you have to tip off at X, but can a school do that? I could tell everyone, I want your coaches to do Y, but can that really help? So, and be accomplished on a campus. So I think that conference office work is different, and it's almost like your big picture a little bit, and trying to look at the schools and what can help them and do the things that they are not able to do or able to concentrate on, I would say. You also have a very strong link with the presidents of those institutions. And even now, I mean, I talk to our presidents, even though we don't have, I would say, formal meetings a lot, they're the people that I keep in the loop, especially, and COVID was a great example here, especially with issues that I think could affect their institution. So I would say the path to conference office work is keeping in mind that you really need to kind of forge the way for all of your schools and all the people that work there to have a path to offering athletic opportunities at the highest level that they possibly can.
You mentioned being the CEO of Bruno Sports Enterprises. Talk a little bit more about what that entails, exactly what you do there.
Yeah, I started that as when I realized that even as a commissioner, you're really almost like a placement service sometimes, because people do call you all the time, because you have access to coaches, you have access to assistants, you have access to, up and coming administrators. So when I realized I was fortunate enough to have those connections, I said I should really try this as my own business, and I did. And I did a number of head coaches searches at all divisions. And now it seems to I concentrate a lot on things like strategic plans and restructuring athletic departments. I was very fortunate. I was able to do help Lindenwood, which is currently a Division II school. They just went Division I in St. Louis. I was able to help them do some restructuring. So it's a combination. I still like the placement piece very much. That's become more and more competitive to try and get those kinds of clients. But what I've done as a result is, I have I'll call it a Rolodex, because that's what, and some of your listeners won't even know what I'm talking about. I have a pretty good, though, background and relationship, I would say, with a lot of people that are making decisions right now for coaches. So I'm happy people call me, and I'm happy to help people do that. It's challenging, though, being on your own and doing that kind of work, because so some days I swear I feel like an ambulance chaser, like, oh, so-and-so's leaving this job, let me call the AD and see if I can help with that. So there's some of that goes on, but in the end, I like to see that the right people end up in the right place.
Most of the time, as you mentioned, in this business is about relationships. And with your background, all the different things you have done, I'm sure those doors are open quite easily sometimes. But also when there's a transition, some of the people that you may know may not no longer be there. You have to be able to establish that relationship and cultivate those relationships as well. Linda, let's take a commercial break. I got to pay some bills here before I get in trouble. You're watching The Right Fit here with Linda Bruno, Commissioner of the Skyline Conference.
The Right Fit Podcast is brought to you by Rising Coaches Search and Consulting. Tired of spending what seems like all of your time and budget filling coaching vacancies? Let Rising Coaches Search and Consulting handle your next coaching search. Our process is simple. We identify, vet, and recruit a talented and diverse group of professionals that fits your institution's profile, all for a low price that we guarantee will beat our competitions. Plus, all of your searches will be handled by former coaches, meaning we will get the best possible insight on all of your candidates, and you'll get the perspective that only a former coach could provide. For testimonials, a full client list, or more information, please visit risingcoaches.com.
Welcome back to the Right Fit Podcast. I'm your host, Daryl Jacobs, and I'm with my guest today, Linda Bruno, Commissioner of the Skyline Conference. Let's get into what the show is all about in terms of being the right fit. Talk about some of the do's and don'ts when interviewing for both coaches and administrators.
Well, I think, first of all, do your homework. I mean, know who you're talking to, know the background of the person that you're talking to. I mean, one of the great things about social media is that information is pretty easy to find, okay? Also, and I tell people this all the time, if there's something about the job, like the location of the school or the division that they're in, or things that are obvious to you that you do not think will fit with what you want to do not just interview for the sake of that. I think a lot of people say, oh, it's good to practice interviews and everything. Wasting people's time and your own, I don't think is ever a good thing. And leading up to the interview, I will tell people this, be careful from the day you get on social media, be careful what you post. It's a problem that it's become more problematic, actually, as we get through the years here and get very used to, now we're all used to email and Facebook and any other thing they come up with. But that stuff it lives on. And you want to be very careful with that. And then be honest in an interview. I think you're going to probably interview more than once. So I would say that, for the first one, use it as an opportunity to show that you are the person for the job. And then for the second one, then you could be a little bit more probing on, what are things about the job that you might not know, or, I bring this to the job. How does the school see that? So those are I try to keep it as simple as possible and not overcomplicate it, because I think really interviews, especially for head coaches, very often they know everything about you. They're really doing this to check to see how you fit, how you are as a person, how you handle yourself. So I try to tell people, relax, pretend it's a conversation. Be prepared, be polite, be a little bit formal, but also remember that you're talking to people that you want to work with on a regular basis. So you need to get them also to show their personalities.
How is the industry of collegiate athletics changing? You have been in it for a long time. Yeah. How is it changing, Linda?
I touched on social media, which obviously has changed so many things. I think that now where we are with the, nature, image, likeness and students' rights and all of those things that are very, very important, it's made coaches' jobs, I think, really, really hard. I think these jobs are a lot harder than they've ever been. And I think AD jobs and president's jobs, you can see it in the fact that, presidents don't stay 20 years like they used to. I mean, there's still some out there, but those are few and far between now. They're really hard jobs. Same thing with ADs, and unfortunately with head coaches too. Some of it by choice, some of it not. I think the days of Mike Krzyzewski type people staying at one place, you're not going to see it as much anymore. And I think it's just we're into instant gratification. I always tell stories of great coaches that are currently in their jobs that are now winning, that, when they took their jobs 10 years ago, they had 3 or 4 losing seasons and people stuck with them. You don't see that as much anymore. So one of the things I tell coaches is that, again, be careful who you work for, and also look at the history. I mean, if they're firing a coach every 4 years, you might not be able to want to sail in and save that. So you need someone with patience. But the industry is so different because, first of all, there's so much money. I mean, the CBS contract has generated so much money that gets filtered down to divisions 1, 2, and 3, that any kind of hire, particularly at the division 1 level, really is scrutinized. And they're paying a lot. I mean, more money than I could have ever imagined head coaches being paid. I mean, if you go back years ago, I mean, there wasn't that kind of money. So it's become a true, it's become a revenue stream for so many schools that they're paying a lot of money, but they expect a lot in return. So I think there's a lot of pressure on head coaches right now. And I also think that on the administrative side, there's a lot of pressure on athletic directors who are now very different backgrounds. When I came up through the business, I mean, I told you, I worked for Jim Valvano, who was the AD basketball coach. I mean, you never see that, very rarely in Division I anymore, that someone can do both. But the money it's just out there, and they want someone that is going to go out and be fundraising. So a lot of our ADs now have that kind of background. We've gone from the traditional, the basketball coach not being the coach anymore and moving over to the AD seat. That kind of thing is going away. I mean, a lot of our background of our the newer ADs, I would say, fundraising and marketing, and it's made things very different. It makes the way they hire very differently. They have a different approach to what they want on a campus, and they have different kind of pressures, I think, than we had back in the old days, I would say.
Would you say is more of a business now, have more of a business model,
Absolutely.
as compared to really being towards amateurism?
Right. Yeah. And you know what, Daryl, it's been a business for a long time, but we never looked at it that way. It's nice to be altruistic almost and say we want to, offer opportunities for student athletes, because we continue to do that. But the only way to do that is to, it costs money to do that. And I think that with where the NCAA is right now with nature, image, likeness, I think that's a great thing for the kids. I think it's going to be a huge problem, though, eventually. Unfortunately, we don't know what we don't know right now, and how to manage that. And I think I don't know if we're ready for that or not. I mean, I'm glad that we have young people that can benefit from it, but that's going to be at a cost, I think.
Talk about, you have experience at all levels in collegiate athletics, from Division III to Division I. Talk about the differences between that now commissioner of the Skyline Conference, which is Division III, compared to Division I, particularly for coaches, in terms of how it looks in terms of the profile of the institution. If you want to be a Division III head coach, a Division II, and a Division I, talk about those differences back then and now that you're in that commissionership in the Skyline Conference.
Yeah, well, back then I didn't have a lot of experience with Division III. Now I do, and Division III. I mean, I could spout off this thing. It's the pure division, and and it's all for the kids, which it is. It is, but they're really difficult jobs in a lot of ways. You need to be very special. First of all, a lot of them are still not full time. I mean, you might be full time on campus, but most of the time you might be teaching a course. You might be, dealing with facilities. So a lot of our head coaches, serve multiple bosses, as you will say, in multiple facets. So I think that and you really do need to, more than anywhere, is be able to coach kids at all levels. I mean, there isn't a high level of recruiting in Division III. There is recruiting, but in the end, it's a lot about participation. And you have to be able to take young people that their want is more than they can actually do. I'll put it that way, and be able to mold them. So Division III, I think, is much more about on a teaching level, and you have to have the patience to do that. Division I, there's a lot of teaching, but you also get the curve's a little bit tighter, I would say, in terms of what young people are able to do when they get to you. And I've enjoyed Division III. We had Yeshiva. I'm very fortunate. Yeshiva's in our conference, and they made a great run, and people just embrace them. And it's great to see. And everyone always tells us, oh, they don't get scholarships. And no, they don't. They don't. It's a different level. It's fun. I really enjoy it. I enjoy Division I as well. But at this, you're the teams are bigger because you don't really, you like to keep kids on the bench that just want to do that. So, and I tell coaches all the time, you can get into Division III and then move out, but I think among the divisions, just don't stay. If Division I is your goal, I think you can get there, but you need to make sure you don't get too comfortable in one place. You need to do a good job and, keep an ear out.
What career advice would you give to coaches? You talked a little bit about it briefly in some of your statement, but what career advice would you give coaches?
Daryl, one of the things, well, first of all, the whole social media thing, okay, just be careful. I mean, I can't tell you the horror stories I've had with, people that were, going to move up to the next stage in an interview, and you catch something on social media. It doesn't have to be bad, but it just doesn't look good. So, you don't have to go there. Also, you have to be able to get to know people. All right. Now, if you go, I laugh because if you go to like the men's Final Four and you walk into the coach's hotel, the lobby is packed with all these coaches on their cell phones, and I swear they're talking to each other. I don't know what's going on there, And I always use that as an example. It's great to know your colleagues, but you have to know people who have the authority to hire. So, which is a little bit more of a challenge. And one of the things I tell coaches now is make sure when you go on the road, you introduce yourself. It could be a little thing. I still remember being in a gym somewhere, and Tom Izzo, I was the Atlantic10 commissioner, and Tom Izzo, the assistant, came over and introduced himself. And I thought that was just, and followed up with then a note, not an email. And I think little things like that could really help. You probably don't remember, but we used to be able to, the assistant coaches used to be able to scout in person. This was before we had tape and everything else. And when that went away, that was a big loss, I think, for coaches to get to know administrators, because they were at other schools, they would sit, they would talk. So I think you really need to go out of your way to try and get to know people that are doing the hiring. And most likely that's going to be your AD. Some of the search firms that are doing these searches are a little bit more political than others. So you kind of need to get into their stable of people. And quite honestly, I don't have any great advice about that, except for the fact that, if you do get an interview through a firm, try and do the best job you can. And if you don't get the job, don't sulk about it. Just say, can you consider me the next time? Because it's all, and we all know this. I mean, athletics, we all think it's like this huge, huge business. It is to a certain degree, but there are a small number of head coaching jobs available every year. It's not like, I didn't get the job at IBM, but Xerox is hiring. Very often, and we're seeing it now. Once this wave of jobs is filled, probably nothing's going to open again for another year. So it's very cyclical, and you have to take advantage of that. And I would say anytime you're able to go to an event where there's ADs or other or people that are head coaches, if you're an assistant, that's great to network that way. And it's got to be beyond social media too. It can't be, I have his name on speed dial, or I have, I can text him. That's good once you know the person. To be able to, though, just take advantage of any learning opportunity you might get. One of the fears, the greatest fear, I think, of any athletic director doing hiring is a head coach who's, might not know all of the recruiting rules. So, you need to show that, you take that seriously, and what you don't know, you're going to find out. Because no one wants to, it doesn't have a lot of room for error. We know that. We're a business of wins and losses. And I always say that carries over to your job every day too, not just on the court. You can't say, damn, I didn't know you couldn't do that. That might work for a very a small problem, but if it's going to develop into a big problem, nobody wants that on their campus anymore. There's no, everyone can make a mistake, but there's not a lot, again, there's not a lot of room for error. So be prepared, prepare yourself the best you can. And when you are able to get a head job, don't be afraid to ask people or to put somebody on your bench that might be able to help you. If you're a great X and O person, maybe you need a recruiter, or vice versa. You're a great practice coach. Game time, you're a little bit nervous. Maybe you need somebody to help you on that. And I've tried to link coaches up that way too, to help, particularly coaches that are in their first head jobs, to see if we could get an assistant that's seasoned and might have some head coaching experience. Get them on your bench for a little bit. Don't be intimidated by that. We're all, everyone wants to win once they get on your bench. That's for sure.
Linda, here's the best part of this show here. The last question. I always enjoy this question the best. It's called word association. I'll say a name, a phrase, whatever. You say the first thing that comes to mind.
Okay.
Let's start with the Big East.
Success.
Atlantic10.
Home.
Iona College.
Love.
And finally, the Skyline Conference.
All of the above. All of the above. Yeah, all of the above. That's the hardest part of the interview, by the way, Jared.
That's kind of like that. It's kind of like that softball question when you're interviewing for a job. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, you're like, oh, really?
Tell me about yourself and why Iona, or why this job, why you want to be here,
Right.
as well. But it's a fun question because sometimes people get stumped by it and they overthink it sometimes, Linda, as well. But you did a fantastic job.
Thank you.
With the word association. And I want to thank you for joining me this afternoon. I want to thank the viewers and listeners for tuning in as well. Join me next Friday with another great guest here on The Right Fit. Until then, please stay healthy, stay safe, and have a wonderful weekend.